Hey everyone, welcome to another great episode of Sales 101, the B2B Sales Classroom. We're your hosts, Donald C. Kelly and
BJ Allen.
And today we are bringing you some amazing discussion. BJ had me thinking on something, and he has a story, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But if this is your first time listening to our podcast, we're two dudes who love sales, and one of us is smart and really cool and oversee a sales training program at BYU and is the big cheese, and that's BJ Allen. And it's Dr. Allen, by the way. And another guy who's an industry sales guy who just so happened to have a podcast, and that's me. And we are talking to sales professionals like you because we both have taught at the higher education level. We saw that there is need for more information, and we wanted to provide a resource, and that's what this podcast is all about. We tackle topics that you are going over in your classes as you're teaching the next generation of sellers, bringing you new insights, things that we learn from industry, and also from students and sales leaders and folks like you. And today's topic falls right off that bandwagon, and BJ had a cool experience. BJ, why don't you tell our good friends what happened in that experience, and which leads to this fabulous discussion we're going to have today.
Yeah, so let's just tee this up by talking about, as professors, we teach so much about how to ask questions, how to ask the right questions, whether you're teaching spin or another technique. How do we ask questions and follow-up questions and dig deep? And I'm right there with you. I think that's a beautiful way to teach. But I had an experience that kind of taught me that maybe I want to be careful how much I emphasize that route. So this was maybe a year or two ago. I was coaching someone, and they were doing some role plays, and I thought they did amazing. I was watching them. They asked all the questions like we talked about. They asked diagnostic questions and information questions, and they dug deep. And after I talked to the customer, and the customer's like, yeah, I didn't feel like that went really well. And I was just shocked. I'm like, this person nailed this, right? Like if they were in a competition, they would got a perfect 100 score. Like this was amazing. And then the customer said something very interesting. They said this: they just asked me over and over about my problems. I already know I have a problem. That's why I'm meeting with them. I'm here to talk about solutions. I already have something in mind I'm looking for. That's why I met with them, but they never asked me what I wanted. And so that kind of created a little bit of fork in the road for me in thinking about how we teach asking questions. A lot of times we use this doctor analogy, like you're the doctor and your job is to ask questions to help them uncover, because they probably don't know. And a lot of the customers, especially if it's cold calling, they've never really thought about that problem before, and you're offering solutions. But sometimes, especially if it's a warm lead or inbound, like they have a reason they're meeting with you. And in this experience that I gave you, this customer wanted to just tell them, look, here's the problem I have, but here's the solution I'm looking for. This is what I meet with you. Can you tell me if you can do this better than your competition? But the person was so obsessed with asking questions about the problem so they could fill their solution that they never asked their customer what they wanted. So I started to highlight this as the difference between needs and want questions. And to maybe use another analogy here, we often use the doctor analogy in sales. Like I go to the doctor and I say, my shoulder hurts, but I don't really know why. And the doctor asks me a bunch of questions. Can you move like this? Does it hurt when you do this? And they're trying to diagnose the problem. And I think that's a beautiful analogy for sales. And it makes it seem like a really people-centered discipline, which I think it is. But maybe imagine that I've already gone to the doctor before and I know what the problem is, but maybe at that time I had something going on and I couldn't do surgery, or I didn't have the money, and now I do. So now I go to a different doctor, and the doctor's like, hey, your shoulder hurts. Yeah. And I'm just about to tell them, yeah, I know what this tendon, this is the one that's broken. I need surgery. And the doctor just goes through the whole thing again with, well, what hurts and how do you move this? And I'm like, I already done this before. Like I know what the problem is. So I think it's just important that we teach, as sellers, but also as we teach our students, that listening isn't about listening with your agenda. It's about listening to what the customer wants. And a lot of times they don't know what they want, and that's fine. And then we're going to ask a lot of diagnostic questions. But starting off the conversation with questions like, hey, Donald, I'm so excited to meet with you today. Thank you for taking the time to do this call. If you don't mind me asking, Donald, what prompted you to want to take this appointment?
Well, right now my shoulder hurts, and I know I'm supposed to do surgery 2 months ago.
Exactly, right? I mean, holy cow, this just saved me. like 20 minutes
Yeah.
diagnostic questions by just saying, Donald, like, why are you here? What do you want?
Yeah.
So there's kind of what I thought been a bit of a swing for me in how I teach asking questions is want to make sure I emphasize both of those in class.
I think this is awesome, BJ, because there's several pieces that I jot down. I like the idea, the fork in the road idea, because I put two things. One path is I don't know, I do know, right?
Yeah.
I do know if I am doing it like, and I think this is where it comes where you can't, as a sales rep, put everyone in one category or assume that all of our customers, our potential customers or clients are one type of people. They're all different individuals. And you have to, but you can probably categorize, but it's just not one path. And that path meaning if I know that I'm looking for a CRM, I probably have done some of the research already on a CRM.
Uh-huh.
And there's a difference when you're cold calling, like say me who use an Excel, which I don't, but let's say I'm using Excel to keep track of my stuff. I don't know the efficacy of a CRM. I am just using something that I've known to help me over the years to keep track of stuff. That person, the diagnosing from that is different than, like you're saying, the diagnosing from, I do have a CRM. I've just outgrown CRM A and I'm looking at CRM B and your CRM C as well, because both of you have a cool feature. But it insults me when you are treating me like prospect A. Well, essentially,
Yeah,
correct?
I love the way you're wording that because I think you're spot on. Is as salespeople, a lot of times we just we think we know because we're so involved in the industry and we talk to, different managers and there's so often that we just we think we know. We think we know
Yeah.
how we can help. We think we have our agenda and just letting the customer sometimes take us on their journey and their process. And I think this is especially important now. And Donald, you would know this better than me because you're living it every day. Is that buyers are becoming more and more savvy, and even if they're not actively looking for a sales stack like that you offer or your service or whatever, they've probably heard of you before. They know a little about what you do, and then especially if they are looking, you can 100% guarantee they've done their research before they call you or before they've filled out the form online or something. And so we have to take that into account. The fact that like buyers are they have a lot more knowledge, they're more savvy. And so we shouldn't always go into the conversation assuming that they don't know a lot and that we're going to have to totally guide the whole conversation to get them to admit they have a problem and then help them find the solution.
Devil's advocate. Two sides to this too. Really like the idea of taking them on a journey. And then the other piece is the assumption. Like you just don't assume, because one of the things we teach in our training program is you heard the idea of soon the sale. And I think there's danger in assuming the sale because I'm assuming that I understand your problem or your situation or what's the next step. What I use is a different, may call it semantics, but I feel it's a whole different meaning. Assure the sale rather than assume the sale. And assure the sale is where I validate the things that we've discussed to ensure that we're on the same page. You know what I mean? And I think that's just relationship 101 where you're communicating, right? The devil's advocate part comes in this. There's a person listening that's going to push this. I do go to the doctor, and then you do tell me, I do tell you, BJ, that it is my shoulder and it is the tendon. I just didn't have time to do the surgery. But Dr. Payne that I went to first time misdiagnosed. How can you not commit negligence and just go off of that and then, you know, prescribe? Because maybe that's not even a real problem, even though you may think that's a real problem. But how do I do that without stepping on your toe or making it seem like I don't want to go treat you like a baby again and go back to treat you like prospect B that don't know? But what can I do or how can I best do it in a way that I'm validating that that's right? You know what I mean? Am I making
Yeah,
sense there?
yeah. So let's carry on. let's carry on the
Yeah.
analogy, and then we'll talk about, the implication for sales. So I go to the doctor, I tell them, hey, this tendon is teared, I need surgery, this is what happened. Like, no doctor's gonna be like, all right, let's do surgery right now. Let's just,
Yeah.
cut it open. They're still gonna take x-rays, they're still gonna do the things they need to, but now they have a better idea of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So now the how the the implication or the application to sales is, if a customer already has an idea of the tool they're looking for, like, every seller would say, yes, I want to know that. It may not end up being the perfect solution for them, but that gives you so much context and a framework for what the customer's thinking about their problem is, the type of solution they're thinking, because then you can relate your tool to the type of solution that they're looking at. It gives you like a base. You can say, we do this, we also do this, or we do this, we don't have that feature. Like, it gives you a starting point to know where to go and the route to take the conversation. So even if we could say, there's the famous Henry Ford quote, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And people like, see, like, the anti-marketing people out there, like, see, we don't need to do customer research. We just come up with cool ideas. And we don't really know if Henry Ford ever said that, but if it,
He did.
I think the concept is still true, is that, people don't always know what they want. And you ask them and they don't always give you the perfect solution to sell them to. But by asking people what they want, they say a faster horse, you learn something really valuable about what's important to them, which is they need to get from point A to point B faster. Maybe
Yeah.
you have something better to offer them to do that, but the starting point gives you a place to understand their mental framework.
Yes. And I think that is by the way, you can tell why he's a doctor, right? Just very, answer that very amazingly. I think that is the critical component there, BJ, that it's the customer's side of things the great sellers, and what I wrote down, great sellers, they know how to educate. And if you did tell me you want to go faster, then that's where I can come in with some questions to find out not so much of, you know, do you need to go fast, but why is it you want to go fast? Or where are you trying to get to? What are you trying to do? Maybe I just need to get home from work faster. Well, maybe the situation's not of a horse, maybe it's something else altogether, right? But if you do find out that, yeah, I need to travel across my state and it's taken me, a week to do that when I need to get back home to my family quicker, then I may have something that you probably haven't heard about. And this is what we call the unconsidered need. Like, is there something that I know I know I have a problem, but I don't know the right solution. I think that's where your question came back. The whole point of this thing is I'm coming to find a solution. I'm humble enough to find a solution, and I'm trusting you to be able to do so as the expert, validate why I need to do this, and then also help me to educate me on some of the possible solutions. And as an expert, you can share with me new stuff that I didn't think about. And I will be like, wow, that's cool. You tell me I can do this in an hour as opposed to a week, you know?
Yeah. I love the way you worded that, Donald. So let me ask you just one more question, because
Sure.
we said we're going to make this a quick episode. We don't want to.
Yeah, this is an amazing episode.
We
By the way, guys, this is just two friends talking. So if you're listening, I'm just kidding. We just so happen to record it. Dang it.
um,
Our conversation is leaked.
let me ask you one more question here, Donald, before we end.
Yeah.
Is how do you gracefully transition the conversation? So if the customer does say, "Oh, Donald, I'm so glad you asked. Like, this is what I'm looking for." How do you transition from that to, have you considered this? I think this is actually a better solution for you.
So how do you, and that's a good question, BJ. How do you transition from again, I hear you and we validate that the tendon is, the issue. And then how do I share with you something totally new? Or if it's the horse example, how do I share with you something totally new? The easiest component that I feel that works best there is a story. And here's why, because you do a couple things. Once you validate it. So we already validated it, but also I validate that this works because I've worked with other people and it gives you a more so credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, I can also relate it's not just me. It
Yeah.
helps me to feel comfortable to know that, oh my goodness, I didn't know other people are going through the same problem. It's taking them a week to get home from work. What? Yeah. So what I would say in this something to the nature of like this, BJ, you bring up a very good point, and I appreciate you being willing to share that with me. I would say, is there anything else regarding that? And you probably tell me, oh no, that's it. Fantastic. I have several other clients in similar situation. One of them actually works in Miami, and he takes his horse and he gets down there and he's been looking for a faster horse for years. How he can do that. What we did, shared with him though was something I was able to get him back home in a week, in 1 hour, and that is something that's called an automobile. Have you ever heard of the automobile before?
Oh, I've never heard of the automobile, Donald.
Imagine having the power of 10 horses that can help you get from one location to the other without spending more than you're spending right now on one horse.
I'm ready to buy. No.
So, but the
Yeah,
the
that
I
was
think the story helps. Like, I have other people that were like this or in a similar situation. But the good thing about that, and here's a benefit about sales, is that you start picturing yourself. You started thinking about these 10 horses and you started picturing yourself getting home an hour earlier. And it was like, and it also shares that this is already proof in a pudding. I'm not giving you some fly by night type of thing. This guy has done it. He's in the same boat. You can relate. There's a solution. Here it is.
I
You know what I
love
mean?
it. I love it. And
Yeah.
also, you know what? Giving a story. I'm so glad that's the route you went. Me and Donald, we didn't talk about this beforehand.
Yeah.
Is another reason that using a story works really well is psychologically the person's going to feel less attacked if by
Yeah.
less like, oh, he's telling me that it's not that what I asked for isn't the right solution. It's very similar to use, like when you're arguing, you use I statements, I feel this, because the person doesn't feel like the center of the concern. Using a third party is very similar. If I use a third party, I'm not making you the center of the conversation, the center of the story. So you feel more psychologically safe. So you're more likely to listen to it. So this is another reason that case studies are really good.
Yes.
Is for that is for that exact reason. And you can even use it similar when you have this is a tangent here, but when the customer has a concern, or when you have a concern about something the customer said, rather than saying, Donald, you said this and I don't really know what that means, right? You say, hey, like one time I had a customer like that who said something very similar, and sometimes they mean like this. Does that sound about right? And so I thought the way you approached that, Donald, was a fantastic role play.
One last thing for the professors out there that's teaching this, BJ, is so why don't so you kind of talk about the transition, and this could be a whole nother episode all in itself, but why don't we ask that though, going back to from the beginning now, why do salespeople always go with this is what I know, and this is my agenda and my portion. If I'm teaching, you're teaching this to your sales students right now, I'm asking you as a professor this, how would you teach that so that they are more self-aware that this is a problem in the first place? Like, is it going back to like one, find out if it's an inbound versus outbound lead, what kind of bucket they fall into, and two, is it listening, at that being more willing to listen, or three, is it just changing the script and just asking people from the get-go, do you have a solution in mind? Like,
I
is
think
it
it's
all of
finding
the
out
above?
as early as you can how much the customer knows and understands about their problem, their solution, and how much of an agenda they have come to the call with. So as early as you can, because that really going to shift the way you talk about it. So inbound and outbound is a good way to kind of guess, but you still got to ask at the beginning. So even if I'm an account, let's say I'm an account executive and my BDR set up an appointment with me, I love starting off the conversation like that. Hey, Donald, thanks so much for taking the call. Hey, you met with Susan before. Susan told me a little about you. But before we go over any of that, I just want to know, Donald, what did Susan say, or what is about the product or your problem that prompted you to want to take this call? And a lot of times they're like, oh, here's what's going on. My boss told me we need to find the solution. And sometimes they're like, yeah, I don't really know. Some of the things Susan said sounded interesting. And then you're like, okay, now I know kind of what avenue that I need to take this, type of questions that I need to ask. And I mean, this is quintessential selling, right? Is we're gonna ask questions, and then we're gonna evolve our sales call based on what the customer says. But we need to think about evolving the call, not just around the way we're going to pitch our product, but also the way we're going to take the types of questions that we ask.
Love it. Well, you all heard some amazing stuff today. The needs versus wants concept. We would love to hear from you, and if you're finding benefit from this topic, drop us a note. Send BJ and I a message on LinkedIn and let us know. Hey, enjoy this particular episode. Here's how I do it. We'd love to hear that. The needs versus want concept. Any last closing remarks, BJ?
No. Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Well, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And please, if you have been loving the podcast and subscribing, please share it with one other person. As always, we want you to succeed. And most importantly,
good luck subscribing. Just kidding. Selling.
see you next one.